chainsaw of Hitler. That was the nickname for this killer weapon, earned for the mechanical roar it unleashed when firing. It wasn't just a machine gun. It was a metallic monster that turned the air into a deadly vibration. The MG-42 wasn't merely another firearm. It became a central piece of the Nazi war machine, engineered with industrial precision to sweep away everything in its path. It didn't just fire bullets. It sowed terror. Each burst was a wall of fire that turned the battlefield into makeshift graves. The story of the MG-42 is not only the story of a weapon, but of a symbol. One that represented Nazi might and forever marked the memory of the war. In the years leading up to 1942, the Wehrmacht had already shown it could ravage Europe with a force built on speed, surprise, and coordination. But there was a weak link in that chain of power: the MG-34. Designed in the 1930s, it was one of the first truly general-purpose machine guns. Light enough for platoon use, yet effective on a tripod for sustained fire. Its accuracy was formidable and its versatility revolutionary. Still, it had a flaw that proved fatal in total war. It was too expensive and complex to manufacture. So, as fronts stretched from the African desert to the frozen Soviet steppes, Germany needed a simpler, cheaper, and more lethal weapon. Out of that urgency, the MG-42 was born.
And most important to you, how do they sound? Well, here's their 34. Now they're 42.
This machine gun was a product of necessity. German engineers adopted stamped steel parts, allowing production at a dizzying pace and far lower cost. The complexity of the MG-34 was left behind. The MG-42 could be assembled quickly, ready for the front in days. As a result, roughly 400,000 units were produced between 1942 and 1945. Each became another cog in the Nazi machinery of death. The design prioritized not only speed of manufacture, but also battlefield effectiveness.
Unlike the Maxim, it does way more than just harness recoil. It uses gas pressure from each fired round to speed up the reload. Then super smooth rollers on top guide each round into the breech quicker. This gas-assisted technology opens up a whole new world of machine gun speed. And the innovation doesn't stop there. The barrel is air-cooled, not water-cooled like the Browning. Now here's the real kicker. An air-cooled barrel is still going to get pretty hot with intensive fire. So the MG-42 has replaceable barrels.
The weapon's hellish rate of fire meant it overheated quickly. But it came with a fast fix. Its barrel change system took only seconds, even under enemy fire. Gunners had to swap barrels every 250 to 300 rounds to keep the white-hot steel from warping. That mechanism turned fragility into endurance, letting the weapon keep its roar going for hours. the MG-42 drew first blood on the Eastern Front. Across the vast Soviet plains, it showed what it could do. Red Army soldiers, used to slower firing weapons, suddenly faced a monster whose sound barely seemed human. In the trenches, simply setting up an MG-42 could turn a defensive position into an impregnable fortress. On the attack, German platoons advanced with confidence, knowing a torrent of bullets behind them could crush any counterstroke. The impact was immediate. Hitler's chainsaw wasn't just another gun. It was a declaration of the Nazi will to dominate with industrial-scale brutality. In Africa, among the ruins of Stalingrad and in Italy's mountains, its roar became part of war's soundtrack. Each gun rolling out of the factory reminded the world that Germany had learned from its mistakes and built a weapon that killed with seemingly superhuman efficiency.
The great advantage that any German unit had in the Second World War, once they had the MG-42, was just simply greater firepower. No matter how many Bren guns or Russian machine guns you've got, the Germans can put more lead in the air than you can. And if you were fighting against it, the weapon was highly effective and incredibly demoralizing.
More than the punch of its bullets, the MG-42 became legend for its sound. With a rate of fire between 1,200 and 1,500 rounds per minute, it produced a continuous buzz that erased any sense of individual shots. These weren't bursts. This was a steel chainsaw ripping through the air. That's how it earned its most feared nickname.
The rapid rate of fire made a terrifying sound. This gun was so deadly, the U.S. Army created training films to help soldiers identify the gun's signature sound in battle. The poor SOBs that found themselves on the business end of this gun nicknamed it Hitler's buzzsaw.
For Allied soldiers, that noise signaled hell. The U.S. Army even made training films to accustom troops to the MG-42's roar, hoping to blunt the panic it sparked in first contact. But no drill could erase the helplessness before a wall of fire that seemed endless. It was the mechanical voice of death. Its psychological impact matched its physical damage. Years later, veterans said the sound of a revving engine or a power tool could hurl them back to the trenches, where enemy MG-42s roared without rest. The noise lodged in memory as deeply as the images of combat. For green troops, the first encounter could be paralyzing. Units sometimes lost cohesion not from casualties, but from the fear that triggered chaos among the men. Terror was part of the design. The MG-42 didn't just kill, it demoralized. It turned battles into a sonic spectacle of panic and despair. It was perhaps the first modern weapon where psychological shock became as crucial as physical destruction. That unmistakable sound made Hitler's chainsaw one of the most feared weapons of the entire war. Thus, the blow it dealt to morale, combined with its overwhelming power, tipped the balance toward the Third Reich.
This firepower allows the Germans to hold more ground with less men.
If we have to name a crucial stage for the MG-42, we go to June 6, 1944, the day the world held its breath. The Normandy landings were not only the largest amphibious operation in history, they were also the battlefield where this German machine gun was consecrated as a symbol of wartime terror. For the Nazis dug into the Atlantic Wall, the MG-42 became the scythe that could balance, for a few hours, the Allies' overwhelming numerical and material superiority.
If you were a British or American soldier with your magazine-fed machine gun taking on an MG-42, you always had the feeling that somehow it was putting down a volume of fire that you simply couldn't cope with.
On the beaches, machine gun nests turned into throats of steel, from which MG-42s spewed fire. Defensive positions were set to cover cross angles, creating true corridors of death. Allied troops had barely stepped onto the sand when the metallic roar tore through the air. It wasn't isolated fire, but a continuous curtain, an unbroken bellow that turned sea and beach into sonic hell. At Omaha, by far the bloodiest, the effect was brutal. The first waves of Americans waded in with water at their waists and gear weighing them down. Many made only a few steps before they were hit. The roar of the MG-42s sliced the air as easily as it mowed down ranks of men. The sea turned red, salt water mixing with blood. Compared to the deafening machine guns, even artillery seemed a whisper. Witnesses called it a slaughterhouse. The Germans, few in number, held out in reinforced bunkers, swapping overheated barrels with the cold efficiency of an assembly line worker. Their discipline was as mechanical as the weapon itself. Fire, change barrel, fire again. Every minute gained was a triumph that delayed the inevitable Allied tide. But even the chainsaw had limits.
5 to 7 seconds was the average time they could change the barrel. In fact, that's what the Allied forces, they trained the infantry to only attack during the barrel change.
Tactics and the Allies' overwhelming logistical superiority finally prevailed. Naval guns pulverized positions, amphibious tanks opened breaches. The determination of thousands of men took the beach inch by inch. When Allied troops seized the nests, they found exhausted gunners surrounded by piles of brass and barrels still glowing and smoking. Normandy was the day the MG-42 showed its sharpest edge. It could not stop the course of history, but it proved that a handful of men armed with this gun could stand against entire armies. And on June 6th, its roar etched itself into survivors' memories as an echo that never fully faded. In the end, the Third Reich fell in ruins and ashes, but not all of its creations were buried with it. Born of steel and urgency, the MG-42 outlived the war and became a blueprint for future machine guns. Its design, simple yet effective, was copied and adapted worldwide. Stamped part production, reliability in extreme conditions, and blistering rate of fire set a new standard. No modern army could ignore that lesson in lethal engineering. In the post-war years, the new Federal Republic of Germany reclaimed the MG-42's heritage. From its design came the MG-42/59 and soon after, the MG-3. Under Rheinmetall, it became a NATO standard during the Cold War. Other nations followed suit. The United States developed the M60, clearly inspired by the MG-42's feed and mechanism. Yugoslavia fielded the MG-53, faithful to the original German caliber. In Spain, the Santa Barbara factory in Oviedo licensed and produced the MG-3, which still rides on tanks and helicopters. Decades later, more than 80 years after its birth, its descendants remain active in numerous armies, roaring everywhere from Afghanistan and Iraq to the Sahel. Beyond the technical legacy, its psychological shadow endured. For those who faced it, the MG-42 remained a symbol of Nazi terror. A metallic monster whose voice could freeze blood. Allied veterans, interviewed half a century later, often said that sound was their most terrifying memory of the war. The history of the MG-42 shows that not all weapons die with the ideology that forged them. Nazism was defeated, but its chainsaw survived. Transformed, modernized, and still present on 21st century battlefields. Its roar, no longer tied to the Reich, remains a reminder of how far wartime engineering can shape fear. In short, it was more than a machine gun. It was a monster of steel whose voice became legend. And though the years have passed, its echo still resounds.
Fuck, that's terrifying. What an adrenaline rush. I love that stuff.
The MG-42 was not simply steel and gunpowder. It proved that modern war could turn technology into an instrument of absolute terror. Its mechanical voice made fear a weapon as devastating as the bullets it spat. Though the Reich that created it burned to ashes, its imprint remained. Today, it lives on in the guns that inherited its design, in military history books, and in the memories of those who once heard it rip the air. Hitler's chainsaw was more than a firearm. It was a symbol of how engineering, bent toward destruction, can forge monsters that outlast their time. With that, we reach the end. If you enjoyed this video, we'll be waiting for you in our next episode as we keep exploring military history.